This book describes the experiences of the 30th Photo Reconnaissance Squadron during their tour of duty in the European Theater of Operations of World War II. The following photographs were given to each member of the group. The pictures show where they were and what they were involved in during their service. Harold never did talk about his experience in the war, but the story of the 30th has been recorded. Thanks to these photos and the book, I have been able to put them together to tell the story. The following narration is a shortened version of the book, along with a few added timelines.
March 7th, 1943, Bellflower, California. Wedding day of Harold and Barbara. 2 months later, on May 1st, 1943, the 30th Photo Reconnaissance Squadron was activated. Training began at Peterson Field, Colorado. Harold was sent to Atlanta, Georgia for 3 months of auto mechanic school. Then it was back to Peterson Field. The 30th left Will Rogers Field in Oklahoma on October 8th, 1943. Three months later, they were preparing to leave for Europe. Barbara and her friend Mabel rode the train from Bellflower to Oklahoma to say goodbye. Harold would be gone for the next year and a half. The 30th traveled from Oklahoma to New Jersey to board the USS Columby on January 17, 1944. The Columby was a French cruise ship that was being used to transport troops from the United States to Europe. The trip took 2 full weeks. They arrived in Glasgow, Scotland on January 31st and boarded a troop train headed for Calgrove, England. Then the train stopped at the station of Calham, where they continued the journey by truck. Trucks were lined up to be quickly loaded up by the men with their packs, duffel bags, and rifles. The trucks were overcrowded. The roads were secondary ones and narrow. The spirits of the men were none too high. The final phase of this journey seemed so definitely a one-way pass. They arrived in Calgrove on February 1st. On the following day, the squadron met in the mess hall. Captain Leghorn spoke to the men, cemented their realization that they were in the 9th Air Force, with a job to do in a hurry. The squadron was in no group. It came under no tactical air command. Instead, it looked to the 9th Air Force headquarters itself for its orders. The 30th was the first photo reconnaissance squadron in the 9th Air Force. On February the 25th, the 30th had 5 F-5As and 4 F-5Cs ready to go, complete with cameras and radios. The 30th had become operational in record time. The squadron had now joined in the mammoth preparation for the opening of the Second Front. May 17th, 1944. Moved from Calgrove to Middlewallop, England. Calgrove was hard to leave. The nightly runs into Watlington would be missed. The prospect of sleeping in tents did not enhance the prospects of life at the new base. When the operations ceased at Calgrove, most of the personnel boarded C-47s and flew down to Middlewallop. The remainder of the advance party pulled in that afternoon and began setting up tents in a wooded area close to a huge gasoline dump. This, coupled with the inevitable stories told by the 67th Group boys of intermittent air raids, made everyone feel as though they were setting up quarters on a powder keg. As the weather grew milder, tent life became very pleasant. Softball games became a nightly occurrence. Some of the boys hit upon the idea of filling water cans with beer from the Group PX, returning to drink it around an open fire. This became a popular pastime. General Quesada visited the squadron one evening, awarded a few good conduct medals to some of the men, and, in a short talk to the squadron, he caused some trepidation in the hearts of the men, as he warned them that many in the gathering that night would not be around after the invasion. The night before D-Day was not particularly different from the evening of the 4th. There were late missions, but little was thought about it. Many were at the movies. Some sipped the English beer. Others actually argued about what day the invasion would come. But only the completely exhausted could sleep through the roar that resounded all night through, as all the planes in the world went winging toward France. First those carrying the precious human cargo, then the bombers and fighters, right through till morning with the flying fortresses. The Hun was hitting back hard. The 30th felt it in the death of Lieutenant Alberty, one of the new pilots. He was attacked by 2 enemy aircraft near Constance. Warned by Captain Thompson, who was flying escort to him, he started evasive action too late. The personable lieutenant was the first loss in combat suffered by the 30th, but that was a small consolation for the loss of a fine boy. The men in the transportation department, including Corporal Barnum, had the tremendous job of waterproofing all of its vehicles and overseeing the waterproofing of all section vehicles. Those were hectic days. When finally all the vehicles were completed, an order was issued that, due to the presence of dock facilities, all vehicles would be de-waterproofed. This in turn was superseded by a new order to re-waterproof. It was a comic strip army technique, but somehow or other it did not appear so funny to the men in the transportation section, or to any of the personnel engaged in the tiresome task. July 3rd, 1944. Moved from Middle Wallop to Les Mulets, France. The 30th became the first photo reconnaissance squadron in France. Les Mulets was a fresh-appearing strip, still under construction and bristling with anti-aircraft batteries. The front lines were very close to the field, as the steady sound of heavy artillery bore witness. In the early days of July, it was possible to watch the German flak trying to hit the Allied aircraft. It was at this time that Captain Russell Miller, Assistant Operations Officer, and perhaps the hottest pilot that ever flew for the 30th, was lost. Lieutenant Sandvik was also seriously injured when he was forced to crash land his ship not far from the airstrip. During this month also, Lieutenant Charles D. Wright, while on DS to 67th TAC Recon Group, was also lost in the Channel. Those were tragic days for the 30th. August 31st, 1944. Moved from Les Mulets to Tulsus-Lenoble and then on to Gosselies, Belgium. It was a strange move. The armies were rolling so smoothly that the movement orders were changed twice. It was finally decided that Tulsus-Lenoble would be the destination. With the 33rd Photo Reconnaissance Squadron in the group, it was not necessary to remain operational at both bases. The 30th was the last squadron to leave Les Mulets. Most of the men made the journey in C-47s, but those fortunate enough to go by road had a trip that could never be forgotten. Moving through the newly liberated towns, the men caught the unbound exhilaration of the French people at its peak. These were the French people right out of the books, complete with the kiss on the cheek.
Wine, fresh eggs, cognac, and cavados were offered by the inhabitants of every small town entered. Those who traveled by air were also given an unforgettable thrill. Each C-47 brought its human cargo over the heart of Paris and buzzed the Eiffel Tower. In the beginning, Glosslis was a distinct disappointment. A wooded area with an overabundance of mud was selected as the site for the 30th. It was directly opposite the field. Each evening, the Belgian citizens would line the fence bordering the area. Yet due to the rush of events that had presented the possibility of enemy agents being in the vicinity, conversation with the civilians was prohibited. Soon there were evening passes to Glosslis and Charleroi, and overnight trips to Brussels. Brussels, where the 30th got reacquainted with ice cream and a version of American swing music. A city that was starved for the sight of an American. It took the 30th to its heart, not forgetting to relieve the boys of their francs in the process. Brussels, the city where it cost $1 to eat a dish of double-full ice cream. After a couple weeks of cold weather in cold tents, rumor came that the squadron was going to move indoors in an effort to duck the blasts of winter. Tents were pulled down, and the 30th moved into a convent in downtown Glosslis. As far as weather was concerned, October proved the most miserable month that the squadron had encountered so far. Yet, in spite of the clouds and rain, the 30th pulled off 2 of the hottest shots of the war. In what was described as the most urgent mission ever requested, Major Mitchell and Lieutenant Tosvin of 67th Group Headquarters flew through mushy weather and intense light flak to dice an enemy ghost gun that threatened to destroy headquarters. Close interpretation revealed the exact whereabouts of the gun, and artillery promptly destroyed it in the morning. On January 1st, a squadron insignia, conceived by Private First Class Bob Lennon, was approved by the War Department, and permission was granted to the 30th to use it whenever feasible. The insignia depicted the head of an Indian scout, wearing a helmet peering through a cloud, signifying the squadron's role as an aerial scout for the Army. The Battle of the Bulge went from December 16th, 1944, to January 25th, 1945. 19,000 Americans lost their lives during this 5-week battle. And this is when the Allies took over the Nazi training camp at Volschlang, Germany. March 24th, 1945. The 30th moves from Glosslis to Volschlang, Germany. The squadron as a whole hated to leave Glosslis. Many friends had been made, and there were too many sources of entertainment to be cast off lightly. The swing bar and the other cafes on that famous lane had served as a haven for the troubled homesick lads of the outfit, and there were always a woman's comforting presence to whom they might pour out their difficulties. Christmas Day, 1944, found all the men restricted because of the proximity of the battle area. Yet the squadron made an earnest effort to make it a pleasant day. The turkey dinner was held in the evening. Many of the men took advantage of the opportunity to invite their Belgian girlfriends to the dinner. A movie topped off the very pleasant evening. Vogelschlag, another of Hitler's bad dreams, where the carefully winnowed graduates of the primary schools in the art of war and tyranny were given a postgraduate course. Vogelschlag was badly hit by the second onslaught of the 9th Division. Huge chunks were chewed out of the walls. Yet the grandeur of the place could not be eradicated, and many of the rooms retained their magnificence. So the 30th cleaned up a portion of the place and moved in. Furniture was for the taking, and every private had a desk. The stay at Vogelschlag was short. The 30th then moved on to Limburg, Germany. The 30th had many firsts to its record. The first photo reconnaissance squadron in the great 9th Air Force, and the first photo reconnaissance squadron to operate from Normandy. And now they were to add another first to their credit. On the 1st of April, the 30th became the first photo reconnaissance squadron to operate on the east side of the Rhine. In a matter of 4 days, the remainder of the squadron had made the crossing of the river. Some flew by C-47s, the others moved by truck. The main distinguishing mark about life in Limburg was the resumption of life in tents and in the mud. Limburg meant the loss of one of the new F-5Es, which nosed over on landing, and the ship was wrecked beyond repair. The pilot was uninjured. After an officers' meeting on Saturday night, April 8, 1945, the news was broken that the scouting party would leave the following morning for Auschwitz. The 6th Armored Division was still at R11, Eschwege. When the 30th arrived, it seemed to have been another case of hurry up and wait. Also on this field were a large number of English prisoners of war. The C-47s were transporting them home to England. It was a field of many nations, Russians and Poles, all waiting for the junction of the two great Allied armies, and they were anxious to do anything to help their liberators. There appeared hardly any room left for the 30th amid such a conglomeration. Yet, after a lengthy conference, they were assigned temporary quarters in the business end of a badly hurt hangar. The feverish activity began early the next morning. Cleaning out a barrack to use as a living quarters, cleaning out the hangar, and cleaning out the rooms in the upper back story for the sectional quarters. The announcement was made on May 7th that a ceasefire would take effect on May 9th. This was VE Day, the end of the war. That night signaled a spontaneous celebration by every member of the squadron. 2 of the 3 famous ingredients prescribed for rejoicing were in abundance: wine and song. The officers' quarters were in a bedlam, as were the enlisted men's barracks. The skies lit up as thousands of flare guns were fired, and the night was deafened from the sound of weapons being discharged. It was a night for rejoicing, and a night for remembering. Remembering how much each man had to be thankful for. Remembering those long nights at Calgrove, when the invasion seemed a long way off, and the efforts of the squadron so pith and futile. Remembering the dicing job of Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell, and how tough those beach obstacles looked. The memories of Middle Wallop, with its D-Day and its planes. Remembering Normandy, the foxholes, the break at St. Lo. Remembering Versailles and Paris, the presumptuous scent of victory. Glossalis with its convent, the V-bombs, the Bulge, the Allies' gigantic Tick offensive, the stopover at Volschlang and Limburg, and here it was VE Day. The army said, 2 down and 1 to go. Someone might well have said to the 30th, a job well done. For in little better than 14 operational months, the outfit had hung up some remarkable records.